Shalom, I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has been successful in getting Israel and the Palestinians to agree to restart direct peace talks. It is the goal of these peace talks to have a final status agreement within 9 months. What is the prophetic significance of this? We are told in Joel chapter 3 verse 2 that the nations will divide the land of Israel. We are told in Zechariah chapter 14 verse 2 that the nations will divide the city of Jerusalem. I believe the fulfillment of these prophecies is through the nations recognizing a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. I believe that this prophecy has already started to be fulfilled. The first stage was when the nations voted on November the 29th of last year on a proposal by the Palestinians to get their status upgraded at the United Nations from an observer to that of being a non-member state. In doing so, the Palestinians proposed that the nations would recognize a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. 138 nations of the world voted yes that there should be a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Then, several weeks ago, I believe the second stage of the fulfillment of this prophecy happened when the European Union issued a directive stating that the European Union does not recognize Israel's sovereignty over any of the territories that Israel captured in the 1967 war, including the Golan Heights, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Furthermore, the European Union said that they don't recognize the legal status of these territories under Israeli domestic law. Therefore, I believe that we have witnessed the fulfillment of the first two stages of the prophecy that the nations would divide the land of Israel in the city of Jerusalem. In Ezekiel chapter 36 verses 1 and 2, it is prophesied that the enemy would declare that the mountains of Israel would be their possession. The mountains of Israel includes the West Bank and East Jerusalem, as Jerusalem itself is surrounded by mountains. The Palestinians have stated their intent that if these current round of direct peace talks does not result in an agreement to establish a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, they will then look to the United Nations and have threatened to go before the International Criminal Court, accusing Israel of violation of international law. However, the Palestinians have stated, as long as they are engaging in peace talks with Israel, they will delay going to the International Criminal Court. If the talks fail, will the United States make a proposal to the UN Security Council that the United Nations recognize a two-state solution in the form of a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, and Israel be recognized as a Jewish state with West Jerusalem as its capital? Or will both sides come to an agreement that will end the conflict, which also resolves all final status issues? Regardless of how things turn out, I believe that we are witnessing the third stage of the fulfillment of the prophecy that the nations will divide the land of Israel in the city of Jerusalem. So based upon the significance of this European Union directive, which explicitly states they do not recognize the West Bank and East Jerusalem as being a part of Israel, thus declaring the European Union's intent that there be the dividing of the land of Israel in the city of Jerusalem, after 138 nations also voted on November the 29th of last year their desire to see the dividing of the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem through the recognition of a Palestinian state. The outcome of the current peace talks, whether it will result in a formal peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians or some type of dividing the land, will be imposed either at the United Nations Security Council or at the International Criminal Court. It would appear that we are living in prophetic times where we will see the fulfillment of this prophecy. And I believe that the prophecy to divide the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem is a trigger event that is associated with the tribulation. So with this being the case, I would like to play for you an excerpt of the United Nations General Assembly voting to divide the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem on November 29th of last year. So now we go to the meeting where the nations of the world voted to upgrade the status of the Palestinians from an observer to a non-member state of the United Nations.
Mr. President, this important draft resolution is aimed at taking a historic decision, granting Palestine the status of non-member observer state. The preamble of the draft resolution reaffirms the unacceptability of the acquisition of territory by force stipulated in the Charter. The other paragraph in the preamble reaffirms the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, including the right to an independent state of Palestine. Mr. President, certain paragraphs in the preamble reaffirm relevant resolutions of the Security Council as well as of the General Assembly concerning the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine that mentions, among others, that Israel must withdraw from occupied Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, that the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, starting with the right to self-determination and the right to establish an independent state, must be achieved, as well as equitable settlement for the refugees of Palestine, as well as the complete cessation of Israeli activities of establishing settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem. The paragraphs in the preamble recall the resolution of the General Assembly, where it has taken note of the proclamation of the state of Palestine by the National Palestinian Council on the 15th of November 1988. These paragraphs also reaffirm the right of all states in the region to live in peace within safe and internationally recognized borders, and the right of both states to live in peace and security side by side. As for the operative paragraphs, it reaffirms the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and to independence in the state of Palestine on the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967. The General Assembly is called upon to grant Palestine the status of non-member observer state. I repeat, we are asking the General Assembly to accord to Palestine a non-member observer state status without prejudging the rights and privileges here of the organization as representative of the Palestinian people. The paragraphs, operative paragraphs, also call for the determination to contribute to the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, and also ask that Israeli occupation that began in 1967 and that will make it possible to realize the vision of two states. These paragraphs also express the urgent need to continue negotiations in order to achieve a peaceful, just, lasting, and comprehensive solution. Paragraph 6 of the draft resolution urges all states, the specialized agencies and organizations of the United States to continue to support and assist the Palestinian people in the early realization of the right to self-determination, to independence, and to freedom as soon as possible. Mr. President, independence, freedom, the right to self-determination, these are principles that have been enshrined by the United Nations Charter. And this is a historic day because it will enshrine those principles of the Charter. Sir, the draft resolution brought to your attention has taken a long time to come here to make official a decision of the General Assembly today, 65 years ago, when the United Nations decided on the partition of historic Palestine into two states, a state which acquired its independence. The other one has waited until now, on this historic day. The eyes of all the children of Palestine are directed towards us, towards the support of the General Assembly in order to realize their aspirations. The General Assembly, since that date, 65 years ago, adopted many resolutions reaffirming the right of the Palestinian people, including the right to self-determination, and reaffirming the need to achieve a just and comprehensive solution to the question of Palestine under the resolutions of international legitimacy. And in this respect, this draft resolution is an additional milestone along the path to realizing the international will to establish a real peace in the Middle East based on the two-state solution. And that is why I call upon all states to contribute today to make history and to pave the way for the future by voting for the draft resolution. Mr. President, in conclusion, I can only express on behalf of the Arab group our great gratitude to all of the states who have introduced this draft resolution, showing in this way their support for the principles of the Charter. This is a victory of the values of truth. It's a victory for the Palestinian people who are watching us. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
An assembly would now take a decision on draft resolution A/67/L.28, entitled Status of Palestine in the United Nations. A recorded vote has been requested. We shall now begin the voting process. Those in favor of draft resolution A/67/L.28, please signify. Those against, and also the abstentions.
The General Assembly is now voting on draft resolution A/67/L28 entitled Status of Palestine in the United Nations. Will all delegations confirm that their votes are accurately reflected on the board? The voting has been completed.
The result of the voting is as follows. In favor, 138. Opposed, 9. Abstentions, 41. I now call a short pause in the proceeding of this meeting.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, an important vote has taken place today in the General Assembly. The decision by the General Assembly to accord Palestine non-member observer status in the United Nations was a prerogative of the member states. I stand ready to fulfill my role and report to this Assembly as requested in the resolution. My position has been consistent all along. I believe that the Palestinians have a legitimate right to their own independent state. I believe that Israel has the right to live in peace and security with its neighbors. There is no substitute for negotiations to that end. Today's vote underscores the urgency of a resumption of meaningful negotiations. We must give due impetus to our collective efforts to ensure that an independent, sovereign, democratic, contiguous, and viable state of Palestine lives side by side with the secure state of Israel. I urge the parties to renew their commitment to a negotiated peace.
I thank the Secretary General of the United Nations for his statement.
Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you the significance of Israel and the Palestinians agreeing to restart direct peace talks, and how it is related to the United Nations General Assembly vote of November the 29th, 2012, and the recent European Union directive wherein it was declared that the European Union member states would not recognize the West Bank and East Jerusalem as belonging to Israel. Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.